Hey everyone, this is Willie Sandiford with the Liberty Revolution podcast. Welcome to episode 5. Our special guest today is Nicholas from the Socially Liberal Facebook page, also on TikTok. We found him on TikTok, or Ethan did more so, and we kind of wanted to have a conversation with him to find out like what his mission is, what he's all about. He's more so talking to Democrats and talking to members of his party in districts or in areas where there's not a Democrat running in the
Right.
primary.
And we invited him on the show because we thought he was interesting. He messaged my campaign, wanting to know my views about some social views, and I thought he was pretty intelligent. We had an interesting conversation. We discussed our opposing beliefs and the things we have in common, which is not something that's really done today between parties. So I thought, let's get this guy on. He can hold conversation pretty well, and he's pretty smart for a Democrat. So maybe let's discuss our opposing beliefs and the things we have in common, and his platform of what he's got going on, and his mission of trying to help Democrat voters where there is no option for them, and introducing them to third parties. So.
Yeah, we thought this conversation was really great. Honestly, like it was really refreshing to be able to talk to somebody with different views and to be able to have this civil discourse. Where nowadays that doesn't tend to happen.
No.
People tend to yell at the other side and just get pissed off. So,
right.
We hope that you guys really enjoy this and hope that you guys get out from it what we got out of it, which is...
Yes, adults can have respectful conversations.
And so, like, with that said, if you guys have a different idea on some of the things we're talking about, we'd love to hear about it. As you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment. We'll get back to your comments as soon as possible. But we would like to get a little bit more of a conversation going about some of these issues, about abortion,
right.
Voter ID.
Man,
we didn't even talk about immigration, but there's a lot of issues. But
and one thing I was thinking, after we interviewed Nick, if more people of different parties and different beliefs would come together and have these civil discussions, we would have more unity in this country.
We wouldn't be as divided as well.
Right, we would have more unity. It's okay to accept that other people believe opposite of you, and instead of trying to win people over with "I'm right and you're wrong," let's just, show me how you believe and why you believe the way you believe. And I'll tell you why I believe the way you believe. And if we don't agree with each other, that's fine, but let's find our common issues.
I think people more so like people need to come to an understanding that it's okay to agree to disagree.
Right.
But we need to be able to hear the other side out so we can
And hearing the other side out today was interesting because I realized that we see a lot of the same problems.
We're all both sides recognize the same issue.
Right.
We're going about them in completely different ways.
And I never even thought like that until after this conversation, so.
So with that said, feel free to enjoy this video. Leave your comments. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, be sure to do that. We're all about, at Liberty Revolution, our goal is to interview as many opposing ideologies as possible, to interview all of the prominent figures in politics and in business, and to kind of provide you guys with just some different outlooks on life based on different experience. So we hope you guys enjoy this, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. Good deal. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. Ethan contacted me, said he was talking with you, and I've been talking with you a little bit myself, and I think we've been kind of excited actually to hear from you. Would you mind just for the viewers, would you mind introducing yourself and just telling them what you're all about?
Yeah, my name's Nicholas Ladendorf. I run a mostly Facebook and TikTok channel called Socially Liberal, and I contact third-party candidates in districts where there's no Democrat running, and I send them a quiz to find out how socially liberal they are. Because when you're in the Democratic Party and you're more progressive, like I am, you like after the primaries are over, you get pushed to vote for the lesser of two evils. And I thought it was really funny that that never applies to third party candidates.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of funny because it seems like maybe this election I might be the lesser of two evils, by the way your quiz worked. So that's kind of cool. But no,
Yeah, I actually got the idea because my when I ran for office, I was getting phone calls for people who didn't live in my district. So I looked up the candidate, and it turned out the district next to me didn't have a Democrat in the race. There was a Libertarian guy running, and he was like really good on social issues. So I just thought it was weird. I thought he was going to get do really well for a Libertarian, and like none of the Democrats in that district voted for him, and that's kind of what seeded the idea.
wow.
Do you think that's because do you think that's because Democrats perceive like third party candidates as just like not like a viable option, or um what's your take on that? Is that more like because I know people are kind of there's people that are like, oh, well, if you vote third party, you're kind of wasting your vote. Um,
They,
but like
they might not have been showing up to vote either because, I don't see
Yeah.
many Republicans voting for Democrats. I don't see many Democrats voting for Republicans, you know.
Well, so I like to. It's partially a joke, but it's mostly true that Republicans are mostly showing up to church on Sunday, so they show up to vote, and so that's why voter turnout really dictates if a Democrat's going to win or not. So part of it is you're right that when there isn't a Democrat on the ballot, they might just not show up to vote. So that is part of it. But there's two other factors. One is that Democrats, it's tribalism. They vote for the D next to the name. They're not thinking strategically about issues and how to progress their agenda. They're just like, oh, I vote for the Democrat. There's no Democrat. I'm gonna skip it. And then the other issue is that, and I wasn't aware of this when I started this group, that Democrats just don't vote down ticket. Like they just leave it blank all the time. They're like, I don't know who this person is. They might only watch MSNBC, which doesn't cover local races. So they have no idea who the candidates are. So they just leave it blank. So you have two extremes there, which suppress down ticket ballots. And that's how, Republicans might, you'll get someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene win and like the senator win in Georgia, and Biden will win the state, but all the other down ticket Democrats, don't do that well. It's because Democrats, like if they don't know who the candidate is, they just don't vote. So, uh, yeah, it's two conflicting ideas. That there's Democrats who just vote tribally, and then the other ones are I've never heard of this guy, so I'm not going to vote for him thing. So,
That's very.
uh, yeah,
You know what got me about, you sit in your survey, and that really surprised me. Uh, I'm all for answering whatever questions are throwing at me, and
hmm
I was going through some of the questions, and I was like, I thought I considered myself kind of conservative.
yeah,
After answering your questions and then seeing how much we actually did have in common, I was like, damn, I'm not as conservative as I thought. Maybe I don't know. I saw you had one person score 30%, and I thought I was kind of leaning a little on that right side there, but then
yeah.
I don't know, like your survey kind of had me thinking about some things.
Well, the questions are designed that way for a reason. I used to work for my family business, so I was really close with my grandfather, and he was subscribed to Ron Paul's newspaper, and so he would just have me read it all the time, and I've read like some of Ron Paul's books and stuff, and so a lot of the questions in there are directly taken from things Ron Paul has said. Like the first question on the quiz is, do you prioritize social welfare or corporate welfare? Well, there was a presidential debate where Ron Paul, they were asking him about cutting social welfare, and he's like, that's a very low priority. And and that's what made me think to put that question on there.
Yeah, very low
Because
priority. I was thinking when I read that, I was like, we're spending billions, 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 all the time on all these foreign wars. And we have our people here that are suffering, they're hungry, they got all these issues, or homelessness or drug crisis, you
yeah,
know, like they're not the ones bankrupting our nation. It's our politicians bankrupting our nation, not the people that are on welfare and receiving benefits from the state.
yeah,
That,
and that's a pretty common discourse on the left too, is that they don't understand why there's all this targeting of people with no power, because it's like a drop in the bucket. And so that's a very common thing we talk about on the left, and like a frustration with the right is that they worry about all this like piddly stuff, the culture war stuff,
right,
and not like the stereotype is the welfare queen, when really like the biggest welfare queens are corporations.
right. The real things that matter. Yeah, people are suffering out there. So
Yeah. Well, it's not even that. Even if you just looked at it mathematically, it's uh, what we spend on, corporations, and like, it depends on where you define, because there's a lot of people on the left who would consider like Raytheon, a corporate welfare queen, because the stealth fighter, was way over budget. But you would have to investigate that to really know if how much of that was intentional, because like a lot of the stealth fighter stuff seems reasonable, it just never worked. So yeah, it just
did you
depends on
develop
where
all
you
these
draw the line on
questions?
some of that.
How did you develop these questions? Were they all based off Ron Paul or
Not all of them. They let's see here. So some of them are just uh so the idea is that I wanted to make the candidates um like understand the like I tried to make them in a way that the candidates could understand, but then I also wanted to make it so anybody who read the answers that was on the left would be like, oh, I could see myself voting for this guy. And so some of them are based on what's important, and then or like what's important to the left, and then other things are just like worded in different ways to try to circumvent like weaselly language. Like there's like four different abortion questions, and part of that is because abortion is such a big issue on the left, but a lot of it is also there's so many weaselly ways to say you support abortion when you really don't, or so I wanted to make sure that I got clear answers on that. And what I've mostly cleared is that most people don't understand what the standard row set was. It
yeah,
becomes really obvious in the reading, but I try not to be too judgmental of that, because I spend a huge amount of time studying policy, and there's so much that I don't know what's going on, that like a regular person who works like full time and everything, they just don't have time to get their head around a lot of that stuff.
On with Roe versus Wade, like my thing on that is isn't like isn't Roe versus Wade supposed to uh return the issue to the states? Because my view on that is like it kind of like, or the 10th Amendment kind of makes it in line with that, I guess. Like or that they should have overturned it specifically, or only relying on the constitutional issue. Like constitutionally, yes, the state should decide this, but like
Well,
I think it's more of a cultural issue, if that makes sense. People shouldn't, like I don't really care, if people do, or I don't really care about abortion, to be honest. But
uh-huh.
um, I think it's more of a cultural issue. People shouldn't want to do that, but if they, yeah, I don't really care. I don't think the government should be involved in it either.
you sound like Kennedy.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, so the I forget the name of the case where they just recently overturned it. That's what kicked it down to a states' right issue. Um, so it was overturned on a states' rights level. So that's what the decision that just came out man, I feel it like in the back of my brain. I can't quite place the name of it, but so that was the case that changed the status quo was on a Tenth Amendment argument, but the original um Roe standard was on that I was referring to is based on viability, and so when the fetus is viable is when Roe made it when abortion was no longer legal is when the fetus is viable. So all these people who are like abortions up to the moment of death uh, or on the moment of birth, they were not talking about Roe or didn't understand what Roe was because the Roe said viability. So if you can have a C-section and the baby would live, it's late to have an abortion. So that's what I was referring to. Um, there there was more complexity to the Roe decision than that, but I that's not foremost on my consciousness right now, so I'm having a hard time retrieving it.
No, one question I really was intrigued by. I remember this one. It was something along the lines of it was an abortion question. I think it was like the mother or the child. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
which one would be more important? I mean, to me, the way I answered it, because it's my own belief, both were equally important. So that's I think that's what I said on your interview. I think I said, hey, both are equally important to me. Um,
Yeah.
but when it comes down to like if she needs abortion or not, uh, me personally, I believe that's a decision that should be made between her, the doctor, or whoever's taking care of her, making that medical decision for her at the time based off,
Yeah.
there's
Hmm.
so many like things that could go into it, like, hey, you might die, you
Yeah.
might die, the baby might die, so I was kind of staying out of that part, but that was an interesting question because it's not something I had thought about. He asked a
Hmm.
couple questions that I was like, kind of makes me think, which I kind of
Well, yeah, that question is tricky too. So my editor actually changed it because I worded it in a weird way, but I did it intentionally, and she didn't understand that intent, and I didn't notice that she changed it until I sent it out to people. But originally, it said a potential child. What's more important, the life of a mother or a potential child? And the reason I
oh,
worded it, yeah, so that does change it a little bit. So the people who took the quiz in 2022, they had a slightly different question than that one. But um, the the idea of the original question was supposed to evoke, is a living person that you can like interact with more important than something that you probably couldn't even see with your naked eye. It was the kind of thing, but there's so many like where you draw the line is such a and which is why Roe the stat was at viability. There's so much nuance to that it opens a lot of questions, and that's another reason I had to have more than one question on abortion is because I didn't want it to be completely pass fail where I understand, like I personally think that abortion is icky, and like I would never ask someone to have if I like got someone pregnant and I would never, and I didn't want to have that kid, I wouldn't ask them to have an abortion.
right.
um but but
That's
like I still believe in that right, but um uh oh crap, I lost my train of thought on that. I could feel it escaping, but but yeah, there's like a lot of angles to it, so I had to have more than one question to make sure to cover all that.
I
um
would think a lot of your people that answer those surveys probably uh, answer different. I'm sure most of them, like most libertarians
mhm,
answer, they're probably pro abortion. Because one thing we noticed, we're a little newer to the party.
mhm,
Me and myself, I'm newer to the party. But when I was in Washington D.C. at the national convention up there, I noticed the majority of the people in the party up there they were pro-abortion, and then there was a small sector that was pro-life. Uh, which I am one of the pro-life libertarians.
mhm.
Now, I did kind of get
Oh
in a little bit though about the mother of the child, medical necessities. So those
yeah.
are my
Oh that was what I was going to bring up too. Another important reason for that question that people don't consider is kind of the chilling effect of the of having a standard beyond Roe, because uh there is like a certain paranoia that regulation against abortion instills in doctors. So you have women who are they're getting sepsis right now because the doctors are so afraid to perform an abortion for a pregnancy that is not viable. Like, so there's this whole government intrusion uh, aspect to consider as
Now, is
um,
that in
you
states
know
even where it's legal?
yeah, well, so a lot of the states, because there's a lot of weasel language, is, they'll say, oh, there's an exception if for different reasons, but like, how much are they going to scrutinize that doctor
Right.
to pass? And like, so let's say a baby has like what percentage of viability is it okay for a doctor to perform an abortion versus what percentage of risk to the woman. So if it's a 10% chance that the woman's going to die, but a 27% chance that the fetus will even survive, will a state board say that that doctor complied with the law, or is that state board going to say, oh, you're a murderer, you should have waited longer, so
Criminal
uh,
charges against the doctor, like,
Hmm.
I don't know. That seems.
Right. So I mean, we call it qualified immunity for police. I mean, what about maybe qualified immunity for doctors?
that's not bad. I've never thought of that before. I might consider rechanging the question to that,
Right.
because that's a really good idea. Is
Yeah, I
qualified immunity for doctors.
because doctors, I mean, like they go to school to learn how to do all this stuff. They have a residency, takes 8, 10 years to
Right.
become a doctor, and then
Yeah.
you're having to perform these medical procedures. Especially if someone like you have to perform an abortion on someone, even in like an or like a life saving abortion. Um,
Hmm.
things go wrong, like even in the
You
most
know,
perfect setting.
it's the same as being a police. You're going by the policies of where you work, what you can do, what you can't do, what's
Yeah.
right in the moment. If you're acting in good faith, I mean, they have good faith for, CPR. I'm a certified CPR. If I'm acting in good faith, I can't be sued. So
Right.
doctor's acting in good faith,
How do
and,
you
and
prove
he's
that you're
he's
acting in good
doing
faith?
what the hospital allows. Well, why should he not? Why can't he have qualified immunity from it?
Yeah. No, I agree that there could be better standards in place.
Oh
But the um yeah, I just don't know if we um and I live in Missouri, and
oh, we did too. So
Yes.
I'm
that's
not.
that's
Oh,
cool.
yeah, that's right. I
Yeah.
interact with so many candidates, I forget who lives where. Uh, but but yeah, it's hard to keep track of who's like an honest actor, like on the state level. Like there, and I see these guys on Twitter. They're like trying to, out MAGA each other constantly. They're
All right.
trying to show that
I don't want
they're
to
like.
interrupt you, but Valentina
Oh, go ahead.
Gomez. Did you watch her?
Oh yeah, yeah, she's
Oh
ridiculous.
man. Okay.
Yeah.
I just had a. As soon as you said that, I was like, okay, Valentina
I don't know.
Gomez.
On both ends of the spectrum, it seems like we're starting to see a lot of like really polarized candidates too. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
so,
Well, the Republican Party is becoming a race to the bottom. It's in the primaries because basically you have to churn out the most fervent members, and like I made that comment earlier about Republicans go to church on Sunday, so it's easy to get them to vote on Tuesday.
Right.
Well, that also means the most fervent members are the ones that you need the support of, because the way politicians work um, is uh, they don't try they try to appeal to what is the most predictable voting base. And when you have a bunch of wingnuts, they're super reliable because they're like in it, they're gonna show up no matter what. And so in a primary, those are the people you have to appeal to the hardest, because they're going to show up to vote. And you might have more reasonable people, and you might even have a majority. Look at the popular vote; it usually goes Democrat. Well, that doesn't help you if that majority, is going to be too busy on Tuesdays, where the really nutty people are gonna be they're gonna make sure they're available to vote.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Historically, like Republicans tend to not turn out very well. Uh, Especially when they should, like whenever Republicans think that an election is in the bag, they tend to not show up as well. And I don't know if that's like a pattern or
I think that might be. I don't think I'm not uh um like a super numbers guy, but I suspect that's not true because when voter turnout is high, Democrats tend to win. And so I think that they might, say that as a way to motivate people to show up. But I don't think that it's as true for Republicans as it is for Democrats. Like it's hard to talk about large groups of people because there's always going to be people like any variety of like actions and thoughts that someone can have is going to be represented in a given population. You know, like I like to joke that Alan Key's daughter is the only truly pro-life uh, person in politics because she's a vegetarian, anti-war, anti-death penalty, pro-life, like all the life issues.
all
She's
the
100% aligned. Like she doesn't squarely fit in any political party. When you go by that, but like everybody else has some kind of nuance to it. So there's always any random ideas or any like random beliefs that someone can have. There's someone who has all those things. Like it doesn't matter if they seem to make sense together or not. Like those people are always going to exist. So when you talk about large groups of people, there's always going to be exceptions, but generally, and this has like always been like there's an old political idiom, Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love. And that's part of why they had to get rid of Joe Biden because
Oh yeah,
Democrats
I would
were
actually
not
agree with
feeling.
that.
that sounds really good. Really
Yeah,
good.
Joe Biden, Democrats were like not looking forward to voting, having the same election again at all. And then you throw on top of it, discord in the party about Gaza and then just the fact that he's so like, like a lot of people are like, when did you know he wasn't fit to be president? It's like, no, that's not the case at all. They just realized he had no chance of winning at this point. And I guess Democrats finally take Trump seriously enough to where they care about losing to him. So they got rid of Joe Biden right away because he just was not. Democrats were not falling in love with this candidate. They were not there. It was going to be a lot easier for them to stay home and watch TV, so that they had to replace with
That
somebody
makes
more exciting. Yeah.
Well, it seems like Kamala was just kind of thrown in there. Like it doesn't seem like she did very well at the DNC though. Like from the news coverage. Now, of course, like we saw firsthand, like that the media
Mm-hmm.
lies after each day's events, and they start releasing headlines. Like the media is exaggerating everything, but you know, I don't. It didn't seem like she had a lot of support at the DNC. Like, or it seemed like there was a lot of division. And that's happening in a lot of parts. Or
I feel
every
like it would have been
party.
nice if the Democrat voters would have had more of a choice on who they wanted.
Yeah.
Well. So I mean, Kamala is not like in my top five picks, like even from the primary she ran in. But the thing about okay, so I think that there's a solid argument to be made that when someone is picked as vice president, they are, part of their job is to be the successor of the president. And so I think it makes sense that if you already had the majority of states vote and the president isn't going to run again,
Jesus,
that that his natural successor would become the successor. So there's that aspect of it, but there's also the fact that um, there was a avenue to have a contested um, convention, but no one chose to jump in the race to run against her. Uh, or at least no one who had any support, that was worth talking about. So I think that there's an argument to be made that it was like about as fair as it could be for how late it was.
Probably
Now,
need time for all that too.
well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really annoying, as someone who lives in Missouri. Uh, they said it was too late for like Marianne Williamson to win before I even got to vote. But but then they can do something like this. So, I don't know. It's when they were saying that it's too late to replace Joe Biden. Like there were people trying to argue that. It's really annoying to me that the election is solved before I even got to vote, but because our primary is just so late. But yeah, so I think given the circumstances, though, having his vice president take over, because I think that she had a strong like core group. Like she's kind of like I'm trying to think of something that's got like a strong following, that like Donnie Darko or something. It wasn't like a box office hit, but it has its fans. Like that's kind of how Kamala Harris was when she ran for president. She had the K Hive. They were very vocal and like jazzed up, even though there's like 20 candidates. Like that's what everybody likes to say, how low she got in that election. But there were 20 candidates. Like everybody got low until Biden started bundling, and
Yeah,
um
it seemed like
so
this year.
so I think it's pretty fair to say that when Joe Biden said, I'm going to pick a black woman as my VP, a lot of people voted for him because he made that promise. So it makes sense that she would take over for him. So um, yeah, I think it's about as fair as it could be, given how late it was. The only BS part of it is the fact that we had the conversation about him being sundowning way after it was obvious that that was the case. And so there should have been a real primary. People shouldn't have been pressured to not run against him because he's so old. And so, I mean, I get a little bit of schadenfreude being a leftist saying that, oh, we need to get rid of Joe Biden because he's a terrible candidate. And then they eventually had to admit I was right. But, like not, so that I get a little bit of joy off of that. But like, we shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. But let's say he had a stroke or something and it impaired him cognitively, and if he was perfectly fine up until that debate and he had a stroke the day before, and then Kamala came in the same way that she did, like that would have been fine. It's just the fact that we didn't have this debate. They purposely tried to, like, I don't think he did any debates against Marianne Williamson. I don't even remember now. It seems so long ago. But yeah, the fact that we didn't have a real primary in the first part is the only part of it that makes me mad. But everything else is basically how you had to do it. So, especially because Ohio had that deadline, that was like a big issue. Like I don't know if you guys knew this. Ohio was threatening to not put Joe Biden on the ballot
Oh,
because yeah, you had to have a nominee 100 days before the election, and the convention was like 95 days before the election. So they were going to not put Joe Biden on the ballot. So they were going to have to appoint him before the election, which I think is why they had that debate so early, was, in case they had to pull the shoot.
What interests me, man, is there's so much anger from the right to the left and from the left to the
Mm,
right. And you got people on the right that think people on the left can't hold a civil conversation. People on the left think people on the right, they're closed-minded and they're arrogant and dumb, and
yeah.
they just honestly, man, I as a third party person, I see a lot of that. Like, I'm like, I feel like I'm stuck in the middle. You know what I mean?
you get all
But
Mm,
that as a third party.
yeah, but as a right-leaning libertarian, uh, I'm not gonna lie, man. I had this impression for a while that speaking to Democrats is just hard, especially after going to the state convention up there and meeting a bunch. But I came across you and what you got going on here, and I'm highly impressed. If all Democrats were as open to talking about their views and differences on a civil level,
mm,
and Republicans I'm not trying to just single out Democrats here and Republicans.
yeah.
I would be more open to, I would definitely be more open to their party,
Mm,
but everything you see online is just, it's the left screaming at the right screaming at the left. And I'm not about that. That's not me at all. For me, it's pretty basic. It's the Constitution. I left my party because yeah, I was a Republican a long time ago, and I left that
Yeah.
simply for the fact I woke up and realized the Republican Party likes to throw the Constitution around a lot, like, oh, we follow the Constitution. We're all about the Constitution. We're constitutional. And then I realized they're not as constitutional as they say they are. My party was not following the Constitution like they think they were. They weren't really about individual rights and liberty like they said they were. And I think they had a misguided belief on it. So, I mean, that's what got me leaving. But I would like to see more people like you just being able to have a civil conversation with people of opposing views because we realize we have a lot in common. And your survey made me realize we actually have a whole lot in common. You know,
Mm.
that really kind of, I believe I expected to score lower than what I did. I'll be honest with you because when you're like, oh, I'll post this and we'll see what the results are. I was like, man, I
Yeah.
don't, I don't know how well I'm gonna do on this, because I'm not a Democrat, you know. And then I looked at it and I was like, huh,
Yeah, I think I tabulated the 2022 results because I only get like a portion who get back to me. Um, and I think my average score was 77%. So and I'm not afraid to state, to share a bad one.
I
Obviously, like I
saw, what
just
was that in Texas? The lady that had like 30, what was it, 33 or
well, I just posted one from Indiana today that she only got 30, and the other one was like uh they're in Texarkana, but they're on the Arkansas. It's kind of cute. There's a couple running in Texarkana. One of them's running for the state house, and the other one is running as for the state senate. And so um, he actually scored higher than his wife, which I thought was kind of funny because you think like on a like some of the abortion issues or something, that she would have scored better than him, but he ended up scoring a little higher.
it
So
makes you wonder, like, are they really libertarian or whatever third party they're claiming to be in? Because it
well,
does
I
seem
mean,
like they might be in the right party. I think from a libertarian standpoint, our party is divided. It's got some issues right now. I'm not gonna lie, but
yeah, I saw in some libertarian groups that there seems to be some kind of upset going on, but I don't know a
there
lot
are
about
there,
it.
there's like a civil war going on between the party right now. But I'll be honest with you, what I respect a lot about third party people is a lot of third party people have opposing views from both sides, and they like to think on their own. So when I see somebody
Mhm.
like that you've interviewed that has scored that low, I'm like,
Yeah.
are they doing their own thinking? Or are they going off the Republican Party, but they just don't want to run as a Republican?
Oh, well, to be a little fair to them, there is a possibility that some of them are more libertarian as you see it. But if they don't answer the question directly, I'll mark them down for that because I just don't have time to like interview everyone and find
Okay.
out what they. So there could be like I feel like they're not avoiding the question, so that's a fail. So some of them might have beliefs that are even more nuanced, but they just didn't get the question. Like uh,
They kind of
the
went too long and exaggerated on it and didn't just say, no, I do know when I answered, I don't know if you remember my questions or not. I did
no,
start off
definitely
with
not.
like a yes or no, and then I went into why. You know,
Yeah, well, I say in the description to give a one or two word answer because I want to avoid that. Like on the Civil War question, I get so many
yeah.
essays on what started the Civil War, and I'm really just looking for a yes or no answer. Like sometimes the extra stuff, somebody will put something in there where I'm like, okay, that's a reasonable. Like for example, Ron Paul, um, he uh, he said his issue with the Civil War is um, we could have just the Union could have bought the slaves and then outlawed it instead of just like trying to take away people's livelihood. So if someone said no, the Civil War wasn't primarily over slavery, and then in their answer elaborated, that the Union could have like had an economic solution to this and avoided the war while phasing out slavery. Like if they answered something like that, I would probably pass them. But if they just say no, and then like give like a big thing without like um where it's like they're downplaying the role of slavery, then I have a problem with that, and I won't pass them on that one.
Yeah, if you're downplaying the role of slavery, then that's kind of
I
disturbing,
mean,
in my opinion.
So,
slavery was the primary,
It was the primary.
it was the catalyst that sprung
Right.
us
yeah,
That's
into.
what
like,
I said yes, but then I
mhm,
also brought up like, hey, there's other things, yes, that is the primary thing. There's no denying it. However,
yeah,
there was also some other things too, such as states' rights that we should also remember, because
yeah, yeah, and I have no problem with
without
people
trying to
wanting
take
to,
away from, the issue of slavery.
right,
'Cause I will definitely acknowledge that was the contributing factor. Slavery is wrong. It should have never even been a thing in the first place, and we shouldn't even argue about it. Like there should be no argument,
yeah.
and anybody who would argue on it really makes me question, what they.
Yeah, well, and I think that there is a time and a place to question it to a degree because, like, it is useful to over intellectualize things
Right,
sometimes, but like when you're filling out a political survey and you're expected to take a stand on something, I
right.
feel like that's not the time to to be overly generous to racists from 200 years ago, or
I was interested. I'm
So,
not sure how socially this is, but I kind of realized I don't remember seeing any gun questions on your survey. Uh, that's something you're
yeah.
thinking about in the future, or I mean, would you even consider that a social issue at this point?
Well, the reason I don't, I have considered putting a gun question on there, but the uh, part of it is I didn't want to immediately. I wanted it to be possible for a libertarian candidate to score 100%. So that is one reason I didn't put it on there because I felt like that it would uh, that would become the primary issue for some people because like I said, I want people to think strategically, and if their issue is gun violence, I don't want them to look at it and be like, oh, this candidate doesn't support my issue, so I'm not going to vote for them. So they're still going to have the same gun policy, um but not and then they're throwing out all their other issues. So that's part of it. Then the other thing is, of course, that if you go far enough to the left, you get your guns back. So I had to factor in. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the actual radical left are just as much about guns as the right is. So
I
um,
used to have a
Yeah,
real close liberal friend who ran for U.S. Congress over District 8 here in Missouri.
mm,
He was very pro-gun,
I was going to say part of the reason there isn't a gun question on the survey too is I didn't want to have any questions on there that I felt like there was a significant amount of Democrats who wouldn't be able to pass the question. And so Democrats or even leftists are kind of all over on the gun thing. You know, the vast majority just want some kind of like registration or, common sense gun laws. Like I think a lot of it is stuff that like a lot of Republicans would agree with too. And I'm not sure about libertarians because I think that they're like I oh man, who was it? One of the libertarian candidates, he said that there should be driver's licenses at a libertarian primary debate, and he got booed on stage. Gary Johnson, uh, he got
Oh,
booed on stage
very
for
good.
saying that there should be a driver's license.
you know,
So
I think with voting, I think there's actually a lot of bipartisan support for like voter ID or having a voter register or having some kind of like identification to vote, just to ensure we all want a fair election, we all want a secure election, like regardless of how
yeah,
we feel about the last election, the one before that, like we want to make sure that the people are voting are eligible to vote, for one, and
yeah.
I think
Well,
that's the big one of the biggest issues amongst Republicans. I think.
I think
well, so the problem with that as an issue, and I've worked as a poll worker, um, like an election judge, and as someone on the left, um, the criticism of that is that it's a solution for a problem that doesn't really exist. Like we don't have a large number of people who are circumventing the current system and voting. And it's like out of the millions and millions of people who vote, there's like a couple handful every year that do it. So and and the reason why the Republicans push it so hard and why Democrats are against it is not because Democrats have a problem with making sure that people are who they say they are. The problem with it is that it creates an additional barrier for minorities and people. Like if you live in a black neighborhood, you're less likely to have a DMV in your neighborhood, so it's harder for you to renew your license or to deal with all the paperwork and everything. So,
I'll be honest with you, like, so where we live here in Farmington, it's more white, but we got a decent black population here, and
mhm.
that I'm pretty close to. But like, be honest with you, man, I have a lot of black people in my inner circle, and I don't think any of them honestly would have any issue presenting an ID to vote, or would even
Well,
agree would
well,
even.
yeah, but
I'm pretty sure they got them, but this might be an inner city issue and not really like a small
yeah,
town.
yeah, because if you think about the problem with you sharing your anecdotal experience from this is that um, you're kind of proving my point because these people have proximity to whiteness,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so you have to think of it that way. And
It
so,
was just like the other question with the polling lines. So to me, I saw it as more as like, okay, well, in the cities, there's just more people in general, and there's just less resources. There's probably less polls, more lines. I mean, you got higher
mhm.
populations, and I just feel like there's more minorities that live in the city in general. So
Yeah,
I got to
well,
think
and
maybe they just kind of get disproportionate, like put into that. I wasn't too sure, but like, and I was wondering
yeah,
maybe that might work the same way of DMVs. I don't know, but you know,
well, I mean, that kind of thing can happen organically, but the fact of the matter is, we know that Republicans specifically have purposely taken advantage of these things in order to suppress the black vote. And so that's why I have a question about it on there. I believe I didn't mark you down for it because you proposed solutions. So that implied to me that you actually want black people to vote, and that's what I'm trying to filter out with that question. Is I didn't ding anybody for just never hearing of it.
they definitely
You know,
need more polls for sure. I mean, I
yeah.
feel like and more
So
access to voting.
yeah, but so when I wrote the question, it might have happened even earlier, but I think in the 2020 election there were like 12-hour lines in black neighborhoods in like Georgia or something. And so that's what made me put that question on there, was because I think that because of like there's not as much discussion. So that's always like a problem with a lot of the questions, is that like I try not to be too much in my own bubble. I don't want like, and I wouldn't even just say that I only have people around me who agree with me, because like plenty of people on the left have problems with things I have to say, especially if they're more mainstream Democrats. But
Yeah, and I
uh,
definitely can speak for like people in the city that got these long waits and stuff. So
mhm,
I definitely couldn't sit here and be like, no, there's no race thing, or there is a race thing. Like, I mean, for real,
yeah,
I just haven't in my personal day, and I haven't experienced it, but I see that there's an issue because I'm hearing about the issue. So yeah, we need to do
yeah,
about the issue and
yeah.
figure.
Well, and some of it might not be on purpose, but there's
Yeah,
definitely no incentive to fix it. If
yeah,
you're the governor, or okay, so like I bring up Georgia. I think his name's Brian Kemp. He was the Secretary of State, and he ran for governor. Well, so he was in charge of the elections. Do you really think what kind of incentive does he have to fix the uh, the polling stations in the districts that are most likely to vote against him?
that's a
You
very good.
know,
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
even
that's
if no one
a very good point.
intentionally
Yeah,
made it harder for those black people to vote, they have a very strong there is a deterrence to them fixing the problem. So,
very good point. And
uh,
honestly, like where I live, the last time I voted, they didn't even check my ID. I literally walked in and they were like, "Okay, what's your name?" Uh,
mhm.
okay, where do you live? And I told them my address, and they're like, okay, that matches up. Go vote. You know, because they had when you register, they got all your information. You know, they know your.
When was this?
This was during this primary, man.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I believe that they well, okay, so what I haven't worked elections in a couple of years, but so the one thing that they do is the reason they usually you have to show I believe in Missouri you do have to you're supposed to show either I know when I was working you had to at least show your voter card, I thought. I
Yeah,
don't think you could just entirely because your voter card proves that you live at that address.
yeah.
Like, I mean, you would have to really be on top of someone's mail to get their voter card and then show up and vote,
Well,
under
see, it's
the.
crazy. So, like, my sister, like I said, we live in Farmington, right? And this is where
Uh-huh.
this happened, And my sister, she has not lived in this town in over 20 years, right? But she is
Yeah.
still on their roster as being a registered voter. And she has
Mhm.
called many, many times and asked them, please take me off because I'm hearing that I'm still on your, oh yeah, we'll take you off. And they never do. So it really makes me wonder, like,
That is weird because again, like the problem is I look at too many other states, so it's easy for me to forget what's in what
right.
state. But I believe they're supposed to so you get switched to an inactive status if you haven't voted in the last couple elections, and then you have higher scrutiny for so like um if you if there wasn't a voter ID before, they would have to check your ID if you're listed as an inactive voter. So if you show up every election and vote, then the scrutiny goes down a little bit. But yeah, in the actual like because they have these like special tablets that are that have all the voting software on it, and it'll change your status if you haven't been an active voter. So um,
After
yeah,
how many voting seasons does it take to become inactive? Do you know, or
well, it's different state to state. I think it's if you go to presidential elections. So like I think so it might be 10 years. So that but I don't remember for sure. You redo training every time you do it. And like I said, I haven't done it since the beginning of the pandemic. So it's been like what is it, like 6 years now since I worked at the worked in election.
well, and I think with requiring a voter ID in order to vote, um, it. I know a lot of I when I was in college, I interacted with a lot of people that were homeless or that were
Mhm.
really having a hard time like regaining their footing. And this was in Kirksville because I was at Truman State for a little bit, uh,
Yeah.
and it's actually incredibly hard for a lot of people to like as a social problem, I guess, to get an ID just in general because
Yeah.
when you don't have a residency, you can't give the DMV an address to have that mailed to. So you
Right.
really don't have the ability to get uh, an identification for yourself, which is basically a necessity.
So I
You
might I
know,
might
like
sound ignorant on this, but don't you need an ID to even register to vote? Because every time I've registered, I've had to have an ID to even register.
to my knowledge, I think I've re-registered this right before this past primary. I think I just had to go online
But I
and
always
enter my address in, but you still have to have
always
an
register at the
address
DMV
to.
though, so I wouldn't know if there was
Oh, I think they can register you to vote
always register at the
when you get
DMV.
your license,
Yeah.
but getting the license is actually a pretty big barrier
So
for
do
a
you
lot
need
of
one to
people.
register to vote? I'm not aware. I don't know if we do or don't, but
I don't believe
I
you
thought
need
we did.
one to register in Missouri. You don't need a license to register in Missouri to
It
vote,
does kind of seem
but
like an issue though, because then like it does kind of seem like if I know you're not registered, then I could just register under your name. You know?
well, no, it would still be connected to you.
Right.
Like I'm just saying,
Well, I
like
feel like
the
whenever you register to
ability.
vote, there should definitely be some
Well, you need to have a
what's your
so
social?
you need to have proof of identity. But it there's like all sorts of things that are count and don't count. And that's like a big part of the debate. Is like
Well, if you're
a
registered,
lot,
that's even, man, as long as you're registered and you are like,
right?
listen, you got the registered card, that should be good enough, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like from what you're saying, if you're registering at the DMV and someone, I mean, someone could steal your identity if they had enough information about you. So, voter ID is not going to solve that issue. If someone can get your driver's license in your name, like the voter ID is not going to solve that problem.
well, maybe
Uh,
instead of punishing voters, maybe punish the people that are voting illegally and just arrest them, you know?
well, they do. There's just so few people who do it because, like, you think about it, if you're someone who's willing to steal someone's identity, how concerned are you with politics? Like it
No,
just
but
there's people who do it, but like it's not a huge number,
I read that like
like
Michigan had like 20,000 dead voters. Like, what?
no, no, Chicago had an issue with that, but that was like pre Al Capone. So, like I don't
Where
remember
does this
what
come
year
from
it
though?
was.
Because I literally like, I'll be scrolling through TikTok or I'll be on man, I
I
watched
mean, some of it's
a
just
documentary about voting and I can't remember what it was. And they're
yeah.
talking about all these states where all these dead voters vote. And I'm like, well, how do they even pull it off?
Okay, well, so this is like a whole thing. So, um, now I didn't see what you saw, so obviously I'm doing a little bit of guesswork here.
Yeah.
But there are concerted efforts to get a lot of people off the voter rolls because they just want to make sure that these like super consistent, high turnout voters will show up all the time. And so, like, the way that George Bush won the 2000 election in Florida was they were kicking anyone off the ballot who had the same name as a convicted felon. So if you were not the convicted felon, you could get removed if there was a convicted felon who had the same name as you. Because some Republican strategists figured out that minorities are more likely to have the same name as another minority. So
That
if your
really
name is,
sucks, man. Because like for me,
yes,
there's like three Ethan Joneses in my
So then
county.
they were just
So
yeah,
they were just removing people in mass
yes.
numbers.
And the program continues to this day. And either in 2020 or 2016, there were people who were their name was like Angel Garcia, and they were purging voters who had the same name as voters in different states, even if they had a different middle initial. So it'd be like Angel M. Garcia. Like it's
Based off of a state's like background check software, nothing like just like totally
yeah,
different states.
yeah, totally different state. They would
Yeah.
claim so
Huh.
they go on right wing radio and stuff and say, oh yeah, we purged all these people who were registered to vote in more than one state, and when really like a lot of them were not the same person at all.
wow.
Yeah, so there's a reporter named Greg Palast who made a documentary about it, and I can't remember the name of the documentary right now, but yeah, he did a whole thing about it. There's all these like think tanks who try to figure out like weaselly ways to skew things because like a lot of conservative uh, if we had like high voter turnout, like I said, Republicans would lose a lot more races. So they just have to do all these like little gimmicks to keep people out, and that's the only reason people on the left have a problem with voter ID. If you said, "Hey, we want to do universal IDs," and then make a voter ID thing, hardly any people would have a problem with that. But like you said, the homeless is a big issue with that because it would be so hard to implement for homeless people.
Well, just have if you have an addition.
It's true, yeah.
It's like if you have an additional barrier that requires I that requires finances if we're being honest because like if
Yeah,
people that are homeless they probably ain't got a job they're trying to get on their feet and this is a
yeah,
legit problem especially in Farmington. I would tell you that like 5 years ago 6 years ago roughly I was in college at the time but or coming home from college there was a lot more homeless people living in Farmington, posted up on the corner, holding signs, like just begging for shit. Um,
yeah,
it like the homeless population. Ethan can attest to this because he works with them, like
Mhm.
he has a case manager, but like it's more than doubled to the point like it's getting hard to handle all the homeless traffic in Farmington. Which I don't mean to call it traffic or anything like
It
that.
is, and I would
Yeah.
love more of them were registered to vote and were
They're
able to
people
vote.
though. They're not problems. It's a problem that we need to address to help
Yeah,
these people.
I do help them get their IDs though, but at the same time, yes, most you're right. Most of them don't have their IDs. They need help. They need help. They need somebody like me to come through and help them get it because it's hard for them to get it on their own. And they should have a voice. And honestly, they don't have a lot of a voice right now.
Yeah,
They're
well,
being
and this is a
discriminated.
big issue. This is a big issue too now because like one of the things that you need to get a lot of ID is like a utility bill. Well, like or like you can't use and I
Yeah,
think I know some states have fixed it, but recently, but a long time, a big issue was cell phones. You don't have a landline, and to get certain forms of ID, you had to provide a physical phone number. You know,
like for a
uh,
felon. Oh man, you should see how hard it is for a felon to get an ID when they're coming out of prison.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard, man. It's hard, especially if they'll ask for their prison ID if they lost it, which the majority of them do, or the COs don't give it to them when they get out of prison. And if
mhm.
they don't have it, they're screwed. You
Yeah,
know,
and there's a lot of debate too on which forms of ID should count. And this is like part of so they were talking about making and this is where like this is obviously more shenanigans, but they were trying to make it so if you had a gun license or like certain IDs they would accept, but then they wouldn't accept like state college IDs or like high school IDs, things like that. So
right?
um,
Because they can be
some
fake.
of so, yeah, some of that is the security level. Like they literally laminate most high school IDs, so anybody can make that. But
Right.
there's also an aspect of they know who's going to show up to vote if you make that an acceptable ID.
Man, I think one thing too, if everybody, if you got a birth certificate, I mean, that should be all you need to get a driver's license, in my opinion. I mean, if you're born in America, I mean, you want an ID, you got a birth certificate,
Mm.
and I don't know what it takes to get your birth certificate from, uh, but I don't, when I requested a copy of my last birth certificate, I don't think it took a whole lot, but it would
It's
be
like
nice if they
40
just had
bucks
a
for
if they
me.
just had a picture attached to it, like if you could,
For I
like
don't know,
on your
like
birth, I don't know, man.
I
I,
feel
I don't think people can identify me from my baby
I
pictures.
there
feel like,
should
man, this
be
is
like
such a
a
big issue. I'll be honest with you, bro. I would like to say like, hey, I'm one of those politicians that's got like a answer for everything. I definitely don't. Like,
it's
if I was
ridiculous.
going to work on this issue as a state representative, I would need to pull a bunch of people together and just really discuss this
Well,
hardcore.
and honestly, because this is an issue that like people really don't talk about. Like the homeless people,
No,
like the homeless population has such a hard time coming, like being able to identify themselves. They could tell you their name, they could tell you all
yeah,
their information, but they don't have a
Yeah,
document. So why do we make it so
and that
hard for just the average person to be able to get a document that the government literally
right.
requires you to have? If they require it, why don't they
And
pay
then your
for it?
basic right to vote is infringed on it
I
because
feel
you
like
can't get
if they're
the
gonna
ID.
require
So
some, if the government is gonna require you to have identification, I almost feel like that if they're gonna require it, they should provide an avenue for you to get it, or
yeah.
especially these homeless people, maybe even for free. Like
honestly, yeah, the government should provide you an avenue.
if they're gonna require an
You
ID,
know,
they should. I think they should provide it for
maybe
free.
they should do that in high school before you graduate.
And yeah,
Yeah.
Or something like that. Or you turn 18, go get your ID. You
Well,
know,
and that's the kind of thing that a lot of this stuff is just like, figuring out the logistics of it.
right?
So, like I said, most people on the left probably wouldn't have a problem with voter ID if the logistics were there to make it fair for everyone to get it. But we know that there are certain forces out there that are just like doing gamesmanship. They figured out these weird demographic um, trends, and then they try to use those to favor them, politically. It's basically the
Right.
same thing as gerrymandering, but it's just on a different level.
like drawing up
You
districts.
know, yeah, you go
Yeah.
ahead. You go
Uh,
ahead.
like gerrymandering. That's basically like drawing up congressional districts based on population and demographics, right?
Yeah, well, and this is part of how Republicans hold a majority in a lot of states is so the way so there is gerrymandering on both sides, and there's a very specific reason why it works better for one side than the other, and that's that when a Democrat gerrymanders their district, they try to make it so they have the most comfortable lead, so they don't really have to do a lot to keep their seat. And then what Republicans do is they're trying to get more seats, so they make sure that each one of their districts is like uh, at as tight of a margin as they can. So you'll see a one Democrat district, so in an area where it should be equal between two parties, the Democrat will have like 58% support in their district, and then they they divvy up the rest of the area. So three Republicans will have a 51%, majority in those districts. And so that's how even if a Republican loses a statewide election, they can still hold on to, one that is gerrymandered, is because they run on a tighter margin, so that way they can grab more seats.
You know, what would be interesting, man.
What?
You know, yeah, like it's kind of funny here, but like, what if like all these districts had to have one Republican and like one person from every party represent that party in that district? You know, then everybody would have a voice, right?
Yeah, I guess
That they
theoretically,
can't really bicker against. You know,
yeah, I guess theoretically, if every party had a
a
representative,
representative.
but then like you're not getting the population aspect of representation.
Right.
Well, then what you would have is you would just have more people creating BS parties so they can overrepresent,
That would
you
be
know.
Yeah,
true. Yeah, that
So
would.
yeah.
I
So
don't know.
you'd
It's
have
like one
like
of
a
those weird
very
thoughts that hit my head. I was like,
I have to say you're kind of a sweet simple soul not to anticipate that you have to anticipate what kind of gamesmanship they'll do
I'm
in
not being
any
like serious.
kind of
I'm not
exchange
saying
you
I'm
do.
not
Yeah.
proposing an idea right now. I'm not
No,
like,
no.
let's draw legislation on this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
no. I mean, like that'd be kind
every
of
now and then
fun.
though I get weird ass ideas in my head, like thoughts, and I'm like, I
You
wonder
know,
how
it'd
that
be
would play
fun.
out,
We should get AI to run through some of these scenarios
to
and
see
see
what would
like,
happen.
yeah, see what happens.
Yeah.
I know.
So
I think AI is getting pretty advanced. I don't know. Like,
well, the problem with well, a lot of things that depends on what AI is doing, because like AI has all sorts of problems with hallucinating. Uh,
oh
so
yeah, you kind of have to tell.
it'll create results that don't exist. You know,
You almost
it,
have to guide it, otherwise it'll give you a wrong answer. It'll kind of BS its way through things,
Hey
like
man, AI is nice. I use it for my campaign. I'm not gonna lie. I use it to help me with strategy. Uh,
or planning things out. Like honestly, like
yeah, planning things out is
like the
nice.
questions I wrote for you today. I know we didn't really go off the script or anything, but those questions came from AI. Because it's like, hey,
uh,
this is what I'm trying to talk about today.
Yeah.
AI is a
I
great like.
I think it's a good brainstorming tool. But it's just not where people think it is. So like what I was just referencing was that there was like a paper written, and the paper seemed pretty much okay, but all the sources it cited were just ones that it it would make up a title based on what sounded like a title of that paper, and then it would attribute someone who does work in that field, but that person never wrote a paper with that title, you know. So
Yeah, AI, it's kind of wrong. Like ChatGPT. I don't know if you consider AI or not, but
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
ask
it's supposed
ChatGPT,
to be.
well, if you ask them about me, they'll tell you. ChatGPT will tell you that I'm the current state representative of my district,
Oh, that's
and
funny.
and that I'm a Republican.
Yeah.
So it's like, they're wrong. They're wrong. But I don't rely on ChatGPT or anything, honestly. But
I've been playing around with a couple different AI mod. Like
yeah,
there's an AI module on X, which is like Grok, which I haven't really used that a whole lot. There's ChatGPT, uh, and there's just like a bunch of like various AI tools that allow you to do like really cool things. Like you can you can literally create a video of yourself at by recording certain sounds and like videos of you doing things, and you can create a deep fake of yourself basically saying anything, and that applies to anyone, which is incredibly scary, especially with like the
I noticed that on TikTok,
2024
man.
election has been crazy enough, but like, can you imagine in like
Yeah.
20 years when AI has advanced so rapidly that you're not going to be able to distinguish a deep fake political ad from
They
the real
they do
one?
that on TikTok a lot, and I'll see like it'd be Trump and Kamala ads, and you look at the comments, and these people are like, "Oh yeah, Trump's my guy," or "Kamala's my girl," and it's like I was looking at like, how do none of you realize that this is not real? This is not. You can't take TikTok. Anything you see on TikTok, you have to do your own research, bro. Most of it's fake, but uh,
There's some cool thing. I think AI is pretty interesting. I do think we might need to curb in on it a little
right.
bit and regulate it, or if it gets out of
So
hand. But
looks like we're getting ready to run out of time here again pretty soon.
oh no, we still got
Uh,
like 10 minutes.
right, but
Mm,
let's go back to socially liberal and what you're doing,
mm,
because we keep kind of getting off topic from. I mean, we're kind of on topic, but we're off at the same time. You know,
yeah.
and I do want to ask because I have been curious. Like, what is one of the most ridiculous answers you've got on a question?
Oh yeah.
Uh, well, so one of the most common answers I get that I think is ridiculous. The question is designed to be ridiculous. I ask, um, is the average member of the KKK or uh, worse than the average member of Antifa or Black Lives Matter?
I forgot
And
all about that
the,
question.
so the reason I asked that question is because I had this theory that people who are more conservative could not admit that most people who are involved with BLM or Antifa are just against racism,
Right,
where like every member of the KKK is racist. Like, sure, there's terrible people in BLM and Antifa, but like they're clearly not like, that's not like a prerequisite of joining the group. So the question is supposed to be a layup, but like such a high number of people don't refuse to answer that question.
and I'm going to tell you, man. When I answered that one, it was a little weird for me because okay, so I will acknowledge, and I think I did in my answer, the KKK is majority racist. And
It's a prerequisite. You are racist if you're in the
well, yeah, you are okay, and I'm pretty sure.
KKK.
Yeah, I'm not denying that.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure my answer though that I said yeah, the KKK is racist, and most people in that are BLM or social movements like that, they're in those because they care, right? Uh,
right.
but
Yeah,
I did say like I don't feel comfortable saying one person is better than another just because from
yeah,
a Christian standpoint, I don't, this is just all on my religion. I'm not really God,
yeah,
so I don't really feel like I can say this person's better than this person because I don't know their true hearts or who
yeah.
they really are. You know what I mean? But
No, I get the
that's why I
tendency to
did
do
acknowledge,
that.
like, yes,
Yeah.
the KKK is racist, 100%. There's no denying
Mhm.
it. Most people in BLM, they're in there because they care. Uh,
Right.
they might, you might have riots or you might have something that seems more extreme, but their heart's in
Yeah.
the place.
No,
So
that's the
I'm gonna
extreme
give them that.
member. It's the
It
extreme
doesn't speak on
members of the.
everybody.
Usually, it's the extreme members of many
Yeah,
organizations that tend to give that organization
Yeah.
a
bad
bad name.
name.
Yeah.
Well,
And I'm not even going into.
that's why I
I'm
went
really
with the KKK. Like, I basically, it'd be the same if I asked, like,
right.
who's better, the average Democrat or Hitler? Like you would
Yes,
expect
Probably
most
have.
people to answer a certain way, and
right.
but when you make it the KKK and BLM, man, people have a really hard time with that, and
Well, I
that's why
didn't
I
know
put
what
it
you
in
would
there.
think about my answer because I was like, man, how do I don't want this dude to think I'm racist, but
Yeah,
I don't really feel comfortable saying one person's better than another. But at the same time, I'm
yeah.
definitely admit that these dudes in the KKK are 100% racist, and other
Yeah,
dudes,
yeah. No,
Yeah,
I
it,
could have picked
right?
another organization like, uh the Fellowship for Growth, or what is it,
Yeah,
that Charlie Kirk group or something. Like I could have named one of those, and
right.
but I purposely wanted to make it, I wanted to make sure that people had to engage their critical thinking on it, and just so
Yeah.
many people refuse to do it. And so I just think it's really funny.
And there
that they,
might have been some deep down racism in them that made them not want to do it.
yeah.
I
Well,
see.
no, I'm sure.
Right?
Oh, for some of them, that's definitely the case. The way, like, when they get every race question 100% wrong,
I mean, they don't.
uh,
Racism is real, but I think,
yeah. No,
and like I
there's
said, I
certain
consider
things where they
myself
could be
a
nuanced.
conservative, and I'm more than willing to admit racism is real, man. It's real. It
Yeah.
exists, and there's no point in trying to make excuses for something that's not right.
Mm.
You know?
Or pretend
Yeah.
it's not
Well,
happening.
and I tried to avoid questions that like avoid it, that like if someone just, there's like a lot of issues like that I just like couldn't, I didn't have any frame of reference on. And so I was trying not to create anything that I could catch somebody up on, that where they just didn't have any frame of reference on it. And so I didn't want to penalize them too much, but then I didn't want anyone to have like a complete
Yeah.
excuse. um
With your,
there's like a
uh,
lot of things that came out of me too that I didn't realize were problematic, that a lot of like guy friends had said to me, and then it's like, oh, actually in retrospect that was messed up that they said that, about women. you know it sounded benign at the time.
uh, with your movement here, man, I'm impressed by it. I'm impressed by this socially liberal thing. I think it's really cool that you're telling your party like, hey, man, uh, maybe there is another option. Like you might have these libertarians or the Green Party or people that we don't completely agree with,
Mm-hmm.
but we agree with them more on things than Republicans. So why don't we give them a shot and hear them out? I think that's actually really freaking cool, because I've just never seen anything like this, and so I was really like, I really support your movement here, man, and I hope you get far with it and get more attention than what you are getting with it because it deserves the attention. You know, uh, I wish you the best on this, bro. Now, have you had anybody that wasn't a libertarian on this,
Oh,
like a
yeah.
Green Party member or just an independent or a Constitution
Lots
Party
of
member?
independence. I won't. Constitutional Party is the only one that I probably won't engage with.
Okay,
But it's never come up, just because I think that they're just as bad, if not worse, than a Republican.
all right.
um but yeah, lots of independents. A lot of states have weird state parties. Like I got one lady refused to send me a digital response, so she printed her answers out and mailed it to me, and she's part of like the
Wow,
California Alliance Party or something. uh
that's
and
really
like,
weird.
yeah, Utah, like there's like most races in Utah don't have like a Democrat running for state office. They have like the Utah Unity Party. Yeah, so a lot of them are just like statewide parties. And uh I got a couple alliance parties this time. Yeah, it's kind of a grab bag, because like I have such a specific criteria that just there's not a whole lot of races that fit into that category. In most places, there's both a Democrat and a Republican. So uh, I can ignore all those races if there's third party candidates in them,
How many
because that's
people
not.
have you read their answers and you're like, they're in the wrong party. Like this guy's a Democrat, this guy's a Republican, this guy is, like how many times have you seen
I,
that?
I don't think I have enough information. I did the candidate that I gave a 30% rating to. Some of her answers, I was like, why is she even a Republican? And I suspect that she just didn't want to run in a Republican primary. Uh, like that's the only answer I can really think of, because her answers just didn't seem to have any kind of
What about your
libertarian
guy? I
thought
was looking
behind
at
it.
your TikTok. You had one that scored really high. I think he
Uh-huh.
damn near 100%. Like why? I saw that and I was like, damn, that guy scored really high. I'm surprised he's not a Democrat. You know?
Well, like I said, I tried to word the questions in a way to where I felt like Ron Paul could get 100% on it. So,
Okay.
uh, yeah, that's why one of my
And
abortions
we are
questions is,
focusing on the social issues and not as much on the economic issues, because there
well,
could
right,
be a big
because
difference.
I the Republicans and the Libertarians are probably pretty much in lockstep on the economic issues. So that's why
Yeah.
I think it would water down the results.
To an extent, like as a libertarian,
Yeah.
I am a little different on I won't go into that right now, but I'm a little different on economic issues and
Right. I mean, from the
Republicans
perspective
and
of a
libertarians.
Democrat,
Like,
because my audience is Democratic voters. So from their point of view,
like I'm
they
one of the
wouldn't
few
see a
libertarians that
difference.
supports a global market. You know,
Yeah.
a lot don't. A lot of them are all about nationalism, and I am about open trade. You know, on a global
Mhm.
level, and you know, not imposing crazy, ridiculous tariffs and ruining our economy. But that's a whole different thing.
Well, actually, I
Yeah.
think we got less than a minute left right now.
Okay.
Nicholas, thank you again for joining us today. I really appreciate you you coming on to this interview.
You got
Yeah.
anything throw
Thanks
out
for
there?
having me.
By watching before you head out, man?
No, just check out the Facebook Vote Socially Liberal, and the TikTok is Socially Liberal.